This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists to inform and to entertain. Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, a podcast misadventuring into the archives of medical history and beyond. Each show, we dissect a history of medicine topic from the past to learn a little something about how medicine got to be the way that it is today. I'm Dr. Max, and I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Dr. Aaron.
Howdy ho.
And no Dr. Mike today. Dr. Mike had to work. He had to work. So we had to pass over, and we got a pinch hitter. We'll get to that in just a minute. Yeah, but we are also joined by our medical history intern, Alba. Hello, Alba.
Hey.
All right. Well, glad to have you guys here. So we'll start out the show here with our Patreon thank yous, and I'm glad that we have a few of these to go. So I want to hear the enthusiasm when we give our thanks here. Are you two ready?
I'm ready.
I'm
yes.
ready.
All right. Excellent.
I'm impressed too.
Oh, good. That's excellent. Well, hey, it's we're going to welcome the newest members of our medical history House of Medicine, and to issue our first ever promotion as well in the ranks. So we have one of those. So let's start there. Let's start with our first survivor of the intern year, now a resident level patron. So I would like to hear a thank you in your own fashion for Becky. Thank you, Becky.
Woohoo! So if she's promoted, she's chief resident now.
I think that's probably how it worked. I don't remember how many residents we have, though, so they're going to have to squabble amongst each other.
We can have more than one chief.
We'll
Heck
figure
yeah,
it out.
Becky. Thanks.
It's going to probably be some sort of MMA fight. But so, and if you can believe it, we also have 3 fellow level patrons to thank. And so I need like even fancier thank yous for these people. And so we're going to start with our first thank you to Ian. Ian, thank you for joining the fellows.
Oh, well, thank you, Ian, for joining. That was my fancier one.
That is excellent, Aaron. You're good luck on topping it. Our next fellow level patron is Tula, longtime fan of the show, by the way. So we have to point that out. And she also was already awarded an eponym for stumping Mike on a previous show. But thank you very much, Tula, for joining at the fellow level. Let's hear it.
Woo!
We did the same thing, Aaron.
we did. That's right. Great minds think alike.
All right, one more to go. So this, please, love to hear some thanks for another fellow level patron, and Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much.
Ryan.
Yeah.
I like this. This is excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much to you guys. And here's the other thing. I had to go ahead and actually have the really cool posters that I put out there as a reward system for people who did sign up at that level, so that you forced me to actually go and make those. It was a gambit. I wasn't sure that I was going to have to, but I appreciate the challenge, and we did make them. So they are going to be on the way as soon as we get them signed. So there we go. Do we, by the way, as we do we have any words of wisdom for this class of medical history enthusiast patrons as they go forth into our fictional House of Medicine? Aaron? No.
Have I already said they can always hurt you more? That's one of my favorites.
No, you haven't. That is true. That's a very old adage in medical training.
They could always hurt you more.
that's dark and dour, though. But I think many fans of our show are okay with that kind of. Well, okay, wisdom is wisdom. And there you have it. So, and if you want to support the show along with our other patrons, check out www.patreon.com/Poor Historians Podcast. So I mentioned that Mike had to work, and so we had a void. We had to fill the void, and we were tackling a subject that we wanted to bring a little extra expertise in. And so for today's episode, we have a guest riding along shotgun to provide that historical spice, that extra perspective I mentioned. And so we are joined by Jerry Landry, the creator of the Presidencies of the United States podcast. And I want to welcome him to the show. Jerry, how are you today?
Doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
We're always thrilled to have guests, especially ones that are like even more historical than we are, have even a larger scope of work. And so before we talk about the topic we're going to be talking about, I wanted to say, and spoiler alert, it might involve a president of the United States, since that's, your expertise.
It's in the title.
Can you let our listeners know a bit about your show and kind of what you do over there?
Absolutely. So the presidencies of the United States has been going since 2017. I started that January, and I set myself the small goal of covering all of US presidential history from the very beginning. But instead of just focusing in on the one individual serving as chief executive, I took another angle. Yes, that person is important. And there are so many other people and events that folks don't know about, but that were key to the shaping of not only the history, but also the office as we know it today. And so Presidencies does a deep dive into presidential history. We get to know so many individuals. We have characters who show up time and again. I don't think we're ever getting rid of General James Wilkinson. He is one of the scoundrels of American history. If you haven't heard of him yet, come to Presidencies. You'll learn a lot about this scoundrel. But Presidencies is really all about looking at the individuals and kind of taking them off of the pedestal, talking about the human stories. And that's looking at, for better or worse, how the office is shaped, reshaped, the successes and the failures, and just really putting it in that human perspective, because so much of what was happening back in those days we can still learn lessons from today. And so that's my point with Presidencies. I've been going at this for years. Like I said, I started in January 2017, and I am just now up to the presidency of James Madison. We're in his second term.
Yeah, okay. Taking our time.
Wow.
Taking our time.
And I usually publish an episode at least, either once a week or once every other week. So if that gives you any indication after 200 something episodes, it's a deep dive.
that is probably, to say the
Wow.
least. It's an incredible body of work, and it's ongoing. So we're happy to have you and and have you along, because we from time to time come across, we're always looking for interesting medical historical topics, and it turns out that sometimes our presidents break apart or, fall down medically, so to speak. And so when you and I were talking a little bit, I think you actually suggested this topic, and I looked at it and I said, "Oh yeah, this is perfect for our typical approach." And so we thought, yeah, it's a great one. And then what I did is what any good physician should do. I delegated it immediately to a colleague and asked Aaron if he would do it. So, but appreciate that. So yeah, without further ado.
As a warm-up, I think I just was wondering how often you guys thought about your palate, because that might be an important part of this story. So is this soft and a hard palate in your mouth? You can, listener, if you're just doing something, kind of private, you can just sort of take your tongue and figure out which is which right now for you. The hard palate is kind of the bony portion of the top of your mouth at the front. And then it transitions to the soft palate. There's a little like rim back there. And most of your teeth are with the hard palate, but very kind of anatomically unforgiving area. So the brain freeze comes from there. Burning the roof of your mouth is very painful there, because there are a ton of nerves at the top of the mouth, and not much space for things to happen. So I don't know, Max, did you look at the palate specifically a lot?
When we ask people to open up, you see it, you see the punching bag, the uvula, you follow that forward. And yeah, I mean, there are things we look for on the palate. Like one of the most interesting things is probably like a petechial rash, where you get like bleeding under the mucous membranes. If somebody has, they're lacking all of their platelets and those sort of things, you get all kinds of there's certain kinds of growths that could be there. It's an area that I don't think a lot of us think about too much until something goes wrong. And stuff goes wrong. It's problem is it's a tough area to get to, surgically speaking. I mean, not that you can't access it, but it's just not a lot of room to work with.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite scary places to look. If you have a poor immune system, you can get a fungal infection, and if you have a little sort of. Sorry, Alba.
Oh God. Yeah,
Yes.
just fungus and then
Yeah.
roof of my mouth. That doesn't sound good.
No, and the scary part is if you actually see a little black sort of spot on the roof of your mouth, that usually means that brain fungus is growing down into the mouth from above, and it's already kind of invaded. Yeah. Yeah. So mucormycosis infections, which I have never seen. I will say this. It is one of those things that I hope I never do see that we learned about that I couldn't get out of my head, because they're like, yeah, you should check for that. I'm like, okay. So now every once in a while I take a look. It's a very important place for traumatic injuries as well. So the palate, you can actually break your face literally. So that's not just a turn of phrase. There are different fracture patterns. When you get hit in the front, you can have fractures from the nose and a triangle and through the upper. So you're going to think this episode probably more about the middle part of your face than you have in a long time.
You're talking like from the, like if you're looking at a skull, like the triangle of the nose down to the upper teeth kind of area and underneath the eye sockets. Is sort of the it's kind of the area. And then from within the mouth, that's where I would.
So all that kind of stuff. There's a lot going on there. And at one point, what we could say colloquially was America's palate was such an important state secret that palate was, hidden in a floating saloon and surgery size to protect national security so that people wouldn't freak out. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
I have to ask though, Jerry, is America's palate, is that an official historical term when we talk about the president?
I think we can make it into an official term, and especially
Jerry has the power to do that because of the work that you've done. I think you have the power to do that. Therefore, okay, America's palate.
Ask maybe, should I know what America's palate is? If I was like a cultured human being, would I know what that means already?
Not that well, you know more about culture than I do. I just go to work in a hospital and make podcasts. I don't know.
or if I had studied in school, should I know what America's palate is? Or is this going to be?
Are we saying America's palate is not the president's palate? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, that's what I'm asking. Like, I don't know.
Because that's what I think it is based on the context here. But
okay. Yeah, that's okay. Because I was imagining like part of somebody's face floating
with an American flag on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The collective palate.
It's the collective palate of America.
The only thing I was thinking of it, the only other thing I can think is we're such a foodie nation now. We must have, because palate. There's a huge amount of taste that comes from smell. So when we talk about palate, I think it's not really the hard palate. I don't think so much as that's just where, I don't know, like, because you smell a tremendous amount of your food. So all the chefs and such that are so famous these days with all their shows and such, that palate is a whole different meaning. Yeah. So,
food palate. Okay. For whatever reason, I was thinking that it was some kind of like legal, historical, presidential, governmental term or something.
No, you think way too much of me. Yeah. I just made it up. Yeah. No, okay. I mean, we can say the American palate is the president's palate, but I don't know. I think that's
how I interpreted it. And then when I asked Jerry, he seemed to indicate that's what it was.
From a culinary standpoint, I think we should elect America's palate. So
okay,
sounds good.
Is it? Oh, it can't be Guy Fieri, is it? It can't be.
No, God, no. I mean, no. He's the people's palate. No, I think it's Christina Tosi. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
Oh my gosh, do yourself a favor. Find an episode of MasterChef on Hulu. She's delightful. Okay. So she's a James Beard Award winning chef who made an entire restaurant on the concept of using the milk that's left over from cereal to make desserts out of. It's called Milk Bar. It's great. And she makes these amazing cakes. Just, go down a little Google rabbit hole. And when she's on the show, like, her palate is so refined that she'll try to taste these dishes that contestants bring her in. They seem to like literally offend her if she doesn't like them. Like it's great. She's a delight. She's a national treasure. That's my little side light. But
big fans here.
She is not the subject of this episode. We are going to talk about a former palate of America. So America's palate in 1893, which is one of our favorite eras on this podcast, belonged to our esteemed and super famous, well-known 24th President Grover Cleveland, who was also the 22nd. I know, Jerry, do you want to give us some background on Grover?
Absolutely. And I will start with I don't think that Cleveland's palate was all that sophisticated. Apparently, whenever he came into the White House, there was a French chef, and he was like, "What is this food you're serving me? I just want basic food."
Want
Ended up
hamburgers.
firing him. Yeah, but that really gets to the heart of Grover Cleveland. So, first of all, Grover Cleveland, nicknamed Big Steve because his first name was actually Stephen. Grover was his middle name.
I thought I was going to ask you if he was named after the Muppet. I wasn't sure if the timelines landed, but I like how he was like, you know what, Steve, too basic. We're going to go with Grover. I'm going to go by my Grover middle name.
But it's interesting, and he's an interesting figure in history. Whenever you start researching his early life, you're like, this guy became president because he was very much a partier. He would go out to the beer halls. He knew how to have a good time. He loved socializing, but he wasn't what you would think of, or what our listeners may think of, as presidential material. But this was an interesting time in America's history after the Civil War. The nation's still trying to figure out what's next, where are we going? But we get into the Gilded Age, and the Gilded Age is corruption. And people are starting to question leadership. People are starting to question, what's really going on in Congress. And there are so many scandals that come up around this time. You have the Grant presidency that is really known for being scandalous, even though Grant himself doesn't seem to have engaged in it. So many of the folks under him did. With the Grant presidency, even though Grant himself wasn't corrupt, there were so many of the folks that were under him that were very corrupt, were involved in all these scandals. And people start to question, okay, well, if these leaders that are there now are so corrupt, maybe we need new folks. And that's where Cleveland comes in.
A novel idea.
He campaigned on this idea of cleaning up corruption. He was seen as being, honest Grover. He was the guy who you could trust. And so as we get along and he's starting to make his rise, he started out in Buffalo, ended up becoming the governor of New York. He was really known for fighting corruption, and especially as a Democrat. So this was a time that politics was still pretty dominated by Republicans, but you have a strong Democratic Party in New York. And he's even challenging Tammany Hall. He's challenging the big corrupt powerhouse in Democratic politics. And so folks start to think, well, maybe this guy needs to be president. And when he initially runs for president in 1884, he's run on this campaign of he's honest, we can trust him, versus the Republican candidate, James G. Blaine, who was dubbed the Continental Liar from the state of Maine.
Okay.
Wow.
I was like, did he run on an opposite platform of like corruption and scandal? Vote for Blaine.
He was the pro-corruption candidate.
Well, at least we've solved all those problems. I think we've moved beyond corruption. That's
boy,
really
howdy,
reassuring.
right?
Sure. Yeah,
Sure.
it's a different age.
Can I say that I always like in school when you'd be in like basic history and stuff, and you're like learning about the presidents. There's a lot of kind of flyover presidents where you're like, it's like Harrison made it a month, and okay, I kind of remember that. And then you go through and there's like these guys in the middle, and I always would like, see Cleveland's picture and be like, that guy he's like one of the most interesting looking presidents we had. And as a kid, that's, as an adult, that's not really an important thing for me to remember, but I'm glad that this background story seems to fit that. Like he sounds like a fun guy. And
you could just sit down and have a beer with him. When did that start? That started with like Carter, didn't it, or something? I don't know.
Wanting to have beer with the president?
Yeah.
I think it probably precedes that.
Apparently you'd have a lot of beers with Grover Cleveland.
Oh,
yeah.
went
out with him.
Yeah, with Cleveland, the party didn't stop.
I also feel like all of that partying might be maybe how we end up at the story a little bit.
Yeah, that could be. That could be. So I understand that he had 2 non-sequential terms, which is one reason why he's a good trivia question. But we can kind of some back. We jump to his second term. I think what started 1892, if I'm correct, and he ran right into a bunch of challenges right away. So that summer, there was a panic of 1893, which I think we should spend at least a 55-minute breakout session
just a
on.
general panic of the public, just
No,
everybody
the
just started running around.
railroads,
Okay,
very
there we go.
sad. And you know what? I've always felt like, why don't we have more trains in this country? And I kind of feel like I was looking at the reason, because all the railroads collapsed in about 1893.
Aaron, are you a
went
secret
bankrupt.
train enthusiast? Are you
I
a
love
railbird?
trains so much. Yeah,
Okay,
you know,
What?
that's okay. It's
I
safe.
love
You
How
can
did
talk
I
about
not
it.
know that?
Yeah, no.
oh my gosh, they're the best. It's like one of the best parts of if I go abroad and it's a nice train country like Switzerland. Oh my God, it's so great. Like they run on time. They're everywhere. I love it. It's so great. But yeah, so like there was a huge speculation bubble. Everything collapsed. And again, unlike today when, the Wall Street's nice and stable and we never get in big trouble and there's no bubbles or speculation, there was one. And there was this huge financial stress on the country. So he was very, very worried that summer that if anything else happened to shake public confidence, that was a big concern for Grover.
Yeah, and that was part of the reason why he was elected to the second term, because he was kind of voted out in 1888. Grover loved to veto stuff. If you have a bill, he's going to veto it. He ended up.
I love this guy.
He ended up with his 2 terms. He vetoed 584 bills. And he's second only to FDR, and FDR had 4 terms, or at least 3 full terms and then part of the 4th. So he had more time, but Grover loved to veto stuff. Unfortunately, he also vetoed stuff like pensions for Civil War veterans, and that kind of
it's a bad look.
caused some
I was like,
problems.
did he read before vetoing? He was just like, give me the stamp.
No, no,
Just run them through. Let's veto.
No.
Chaos reigns.
But during the term of his successor and then became his predecessor, Benjamin Harrison, they pushed through what was called the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which basically at this time, and we think of the gold standard, well, this was an attempt, and it was very popular in the western part of the U.S. because they had a lot of silver. They wanted it to be used as part of the basis of money. And so the Silver Purchase Act made the federal government purchase so much silver and use that as kind of a basis for the currency. But then you have the panic, and you have people like Cleveland. Cleveland was against silver. He didn't want it. He wanted us to be on a strict gold standard. He felt that was more safe for the currency and for the economy. And so when the Panic of 1893 happens, and now we know, yes, it was because any stretch of land that they had, oh, well, let's build a railroad on it, even though they just really didn't need it. And we know that was the bubble that burst, and railroads supported so many other industries. And so there was this whole ripple effect through the entire economy. We know that was the real cause of it. But Cleveland and people who believed in the gold standard were like, no, it was the silver stuff. And so Cleveland at this point, this was still early in his presidency, he was bringing Congress back for a special session to repeal the Silver Purchase Act to try and address the panic. And then the event that we're going to be talking about happens.
Yeah, which it's actually presented as a little bit on the side. So around that time, since the summer of 1893, I believe, his presidential doctor, Major Robert O'Reilly, was also an acquaintance. So I think read a couple accounts where he just said, hey, can you take a look at this thing? So he said, he just pointed to this little mass that he had on the palate, on the hard palate of his mouth, kind of on the front. Yeah, to the right side, I believe. And
those whistles were Aaron's brain orientation noise, where he's dialing in his mind's eye. Just
You know what? I was literally looking at the internet pictures and then thinking, do I have to flip that because it's a CT scan? Then I'm like, no, it's not. It's an actual picture. And then on the palette, oh, but it is upside down. So yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Trust me, I will for sure know which side of your body I'm going to perform a procedure on. The Major Robert O'Reilly immediately said, you have, the words were, an unwanted tenant that should be removed. And that's notable because nobody likes to say cancer. I don't know why they pointed that out. They're like, they didn't like the word cancer. I'm like, everybody hates that word.
Nobody's into it.
But, interestingly, it sounds like Grant had just died of a cancer of the mouth I don't know if it was of the palate. It was still of the head and neck and the mouth about 10 years ago. So not great for many reasons.
I mean, 10 years before Cleveland. So it's like kind of at the forefront of the national consciousness, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can talk briefly about just head and neck cancer is generally the way it's referred to, but oral cancers are just really nasty. There are a tremendous amount of treatment advances now, mostly to do with really precise surgical techniques, which started with Mohs surgery in the 30s, was more dermatologic, but they're just getting better and better at taking out more of the tumor and less of everything around it. But the big problem is there's no extra room in the head and neck. So anytime you have any of these, they're so invasive. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then, from our standpoint, there's so many things that have to do with breathing and eating and such that are all around where these grow. So by the time people
prime
show
real estate
up
there.
Yeah, there's
it's a lot of important stuff.
Well, as an emergency doc, I think we all particularly hate these even more because, these type of cancers can grow on the tongue, can grow in the tonsil areas and things like all the areas around the airway. And they're always going to make us more nervous if we happen to know, or something. In some cases, you discover that there's something there, and so they're always particularly in these troublesome areas. And that's not to say, as much as you're going through treatment for these things, can always be difficult. You want to catch them early when they haven't spread anywhere, because then you don't have to take out so much. But that's all cancer sucks. We hate all of it, and these are just a peculiar. This is just a tough area. It's a tough area to have it, and it's usually, I think most of these are squamous cell cancers, which is just a type of cell that lines so many of the surfaces of the body, and it's just So it's just one of those things. It's a least favorite. It's on my least favorite board.
Yeah, it's definitely, and there's so many, just ways for the tumor to erode and destroy stuff in bad ways. Most common causes still are tobacco and alcohol. So that's where, I'm sure Grover was refraining from any cigar use with his large snifters of brandy. So his lifestyle may well have come back at him at this, followed closely by HPV. So just a little, vaccine kick in here. Human papillomavirus is something that is now pretty routine, I think, at 12-ish for boys and girls. And
vaccine,
yeah. And so this got a lot of, another one of my things, I like vaccines almost as much as I like trains. So
it's a lot.
Me too. Load me up.
It is a lot, right? So people think of HPV as a sexually transmitted infection, which it is. But the reason why it's a big deal is because it's silent and because it causes cancer. So it's a bad combination. You might not know you have it, and it's implicated in all sorts of cervical cancers and so on, but then also the head and neck cancers, it's definitely a risk for. So there we go with that. Always good for the happy topics. So, but regardless, so this is a big problem now. At the time, it was considered a death sentence. And I think that's still the reason why it's such a difficult word to hear, because that it's still, is equated with that feeling for people, even though that's definitely not the case in many, many cases. Cleveland wanted to get this operated on right away regardless, but he also had to decide to hide it as best he could. So from what I understand, he said, well, okay, let's make a plan. And I believe, so I read one case that said this was suggested to him. There's another, all these are in the show notes that was actually Cleveland's recommendation. They said, hey, I'm going on a fishing trip, and I have a friend who has a long yacht. There's a picture of this yacht. It's a big, sturdy 2-stack steam yacht. I mean, it's a big old boat. And they were going to sail from New York to Cape Cod, where he had a house in Cape Cod. So it makes sense that he kind of take this trip. And his friend, Commodore Elias Benedict's yacht, the Oneida, was the site of a planned surgery on the boat on the president. So this was a sort of a, gosh, let's hide this from the world type of location, which was even by the standards of the late 1800s, not ideal for surgery.
I like a couple of things I like about this, especially we've got to do this still by today's standards, a tougher technique wise surgery, right? This is, surgery within the oral cavity, especially that could invade into the skull, is not, I've not done it myself, but I've been in on cases, as part of training, and just like, this is a tough area to work in. So let's take it with the, I guess arguably at the time, one of the most important people that is on earth, the leader of the United States. Let's do this surgery. We got to get it right. And instead of a hospital, let's do it a clandestine boat while it's moving. And we're going to, might as well sail to the cod because, if we're going to, however things go, let's end up, we'll drop them off at home and go from there. But it's kind of on its surface, we're gonna do this procedure on a moving boat. It's a 140 some foot boat, as you said, but it still pitches and rolls. Like if you've been on a cruise boat, now I believe they did try to choose a day with good weather, so there's that. But I don't think that's super predictable. And so I kind of like we'll talk about how well everything worked out, but I just kind of like the it's sort of an insane plan on paper, and I respect that.
Well, and you really, I would just love to have sat in, and that was the thing. He could only tell a few folks, of course, if you're trying to keep this secret. Anybody who, and that's what I love about conspiracy theories that supposedly involve hundreds of people. It's like, no, when you get past like 5 people, even 5 is probably 4 too many. You can't keep a secret. And so he had to be very selective about who he told about this. The vice president didn't know. Most of the cabinet didn't know. The only person who knew was the Secretary of War, who was a friend of his. And they had to think through, okay, well, what's something that you usually do? And so he had gone fishing on this yacht on numerous occasions.
Go fishing on a yacht. That's something that a guy like Grover Cleveland would do. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, it was in the summer, so he usually made his way to his home on Cape Cod. And they tried to think through, okay, well, how can we make this look as normal as possible? But then who thinks, yes, having surgery on a boat out in the water is a good idea?
Well, if anything went wrong, they could just call in a rescue chopper and medevac him. So I can see and
Edison was working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at this point they had antiseptic techniques, so I'm sure it was a very well cleaned and sterile operating theater on the wooden boat, probably wooden interior boat. And
wouldn't there be a private place that doesn't have to be on a boat? I would think somewhere, surely somewhere's a private place that's not a boat.
But does that make a good story? No. If you're going to do this, make it a good story afterwards. So they because
it's definitely a party guy's plan. He's like, what about on a boat though?
Let's do it on a boat.
I know Aaron's going to get there, but this also, this is a party boat. I mean, they're taking cocaine and ether with them.
Oh my God.
So, go big.
That was the joke before. He's like, when's the last time we were on a boat with cocaine, eh, Major? Yeah, right? Hasn't been that long. I can see that.
Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
They could buy it at the store, though. Come on.
Yeah, anyway. That's fair. So it was about a 90-minute surgery and 3 doctors and a dentist. So we had the president's doctor, which I don't know if Major O'Reilly really had specific ENT expertise or if he just was like, I'm going to see this. Yeah. He called in 2 experts, Dr. William Keene and Dr. Joseph Bryant, for the surgery. And then Ferdinand Hasbrouck was a dentist who did the anesthesia and sort of doubled as the cover story. So the doctors were like, they're my friends, but the plan was to say, I had some tooth trouble for the swelling and the recovery and such. So he was sort of a double agent and did the anesthesia, which, Max, I didn't even think of this, but you mentioned how did dentists do this?
Dentists do some degree of anesthesia nowadays, but it seemed odd to me, so I had to kind of look it up. And anesthesiology as a specialty practice itself, like we had anesthesia, in the 1860s, 1870s, when it was, knock you out with ether or chloroform, and don't photosynthesize your patients. But you knock somebody out, and like anesthesia was like huff this rag until you kind of pass out and we're going to do a quick surgery. It wasn't a refined practice. But and here's what I found. There's a little bit of a Wisconsin shout out, because the actual first department of anesthesiology was founded in 1927 at the University of Wisconsin by Dr. Ralph Waters. And so, but this takes place before that by a good couple of decades. And so it wasn't really a formal, it was just like, who's familiar with this? And, the dentist of the time probably would have been. And so, he's gonna quote unquote pull his tooth on the boat or whatnot as the cover story. But he probably did know his way around, ether and cocaine, as we'll find out.
Yeah, for sure. So as per, I think they started out with some topical cocaine anesthesia, and then so that numbed the roof of the mouth, and then they went through the mucosa, which is the sort of the skin layer on the inside of the mouth down to the bone, and then gave him a bunch of inhaled ether. And they were careful. This was part of it too. They were going inside the lip the whole time, so there was no external incision to try to say that he had surgery. So they're just trying to make it look like he had this tooth problem. As sort of a cover story, and they took out, I think, 5 or 6 teeth. There are some diagrams in here, but a good portion of the bones of the soft palate with this mass, which goes
the bones of the hard palate.
Bones of the hard palate. Oops, sorry. Yeah, there's no. Oh God, I just say
there's
bones
no
of
bones
the
in the
soft
soft
palate.
palate.
No, you're right.
That's
even
why it's
even
soft.
Alva knows that. That's right. Oh God, you know what? Oh goodness gracious. Yeah, all my surgical colleagues are like, oh, typically our doctor. So bones of the hard palate, which the top of the palate is the floor of the maxillary, the sinus, like kind of right by the cheek. So the mass itself was a couple centimeters, and it actually invaded through the top of the bone into the bottom of the sinus itself, and sort of broken through a little bit. Took that out. They referred to it. I saw references to an epithelioma and then a verrucous carcinoma or something like that. Both of which are
is what verrucous means. So like wart-like in appearance.
Yeah. So it looks like probably some form of what's called a squamous cell carcinoma, which is a very common form of head and neck cancer today as well. Just growing out of those skin layers, sort of basically. And just took that whole chunk out and packed it with a bunch of gauze and let him wake up. I mean, almost to the middle of the palate there. So it's not a fun surgery for our President Grover.
And cosmetically too, a problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna
be noticeable.
Yeah.
Elvis like, so parts of your face.
That's gonna be like collapsed part.
Yeah, so that you're talking the bony structures below your nose and on that hard palate, and you use your tongue up against the roof of your mouth to speak and form syllables and help move your lips.
Notice part of his face is gone.
Well,
right? I mean, people are going to notice, right?
People do notice.
Yes.
Well, and it's funny because one of the areas of concern, as they were trying to plan this out, Grover Cleveland had a distinctive mustache. And so they were like, if we have to shave his mustache, people are really going to notice. And so they were really concerned about saving that mustache, removing part of his mouth. But, let's worry about the mustache.
Here, I'm going to add some expertise here for reasons. But so it is an excellent mustache. Definitely an 8 out of 10 on the scale. The other thing I'll note for the listener, it's actually a walrus style mustache where the hairs are combed downward and inward. And this is one of the hardest mustaches to wear because it will be absolutely involved with everything you eat. And, for those of us brave enough to have a mustache for all of the days of their life, for the last 7 years, it's one of those things that it's an excellent mustache. I have to point it out, but it's a walrus style, which since you comb down over your face, covers your lip exceptionally well. And so that's thinking. That's 4D chess when it comes to mustaches and concealing a surgery.
So they did, as he recovered, took him about 2 to 3 weeks to recover. and so that was part of this cruise up to Cape Cod was part of the plan. So it's more time out of the public eye to try to recover. And then they called it a vulcanized prosthetic. So there was I don't know, prosthetologist, I forget the name, but made a vulcanized, probably rubber prosthetic to actually fit into that space as it healed, so that it would sort of support his face. And with it, they did a good enough job. I think this was something we talked about with our face maker Lindsay Fitzharris episode a while back. I mean,
the
these
plastic
prosthetics,
surgery.
I mean, they were usually handmade and pretty amazing. So it allowed him to then speak normally when that was in place. So he got all that sort of a lot of the qualities of his voice back, which he was, it sounds like, good speaker, and did address Congress after this with the prosthetic in place. And
Wow.
yeah,
Didn't remember the specifics, but I remember reading they were worried about an upcoming speech. Was Jerry, do you know off the top of your head what it was?
Yeah, so basically the day that he left to go for the surgery, he also issued a proclamation calling Congress back into the special session to repeal the Silver Purchase Act. And that was his big policy. He wanted to repeal the Silver Purchase Act. And so they were like, okay, he's got to be recovered. We've got to have it so that he can speak, that folks won't notice. And all of this, really played into it. It was a big part of the administration's push to repeal the Silver Purchase Act. And so it was...
You got to be able to make that speech.
Yeah, he's got to be able to make that
He just
speech.
removed a bunch of his hard palate. So that's tricky. That's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, and they held the story. I mean, he recovered, he gave the speech. There was I saw tell of a reporter named E.J. Edwards, who's in the Philadelphia Press, who actually figured this out and scooped the story. He's like, wow, this seems like a really long time, I guess, to be out of the public eye. And got, I don't remember who he got to sort of corroborate it, but went ahead and published. And Cleveland's reputation was so good for honesty that he was able to kind of deny this and bury it. And the poor reporter was disgraced because everyone's like, nah, that's honest Grover. He would never lie to us. You must be lying. So yeah, I know. It's actually kind of, I feel a little bad for this, reporter, but also, yeah, I don't know. So but that actually was an issue. He lived for 15 more years after this. So, the surgery was very successful in that sense. I don't know if we ever had the pathology, but yeah.
Well, I was going to say, did I read that somebody actually came out to vindicate the reporter later because he had been so...
Yes. Yeah, Jerry, do you remember it was...
Yeah, so basically what happened, and to kind of talk about, starting with Cleveland's reputation for being honest. So in the 1884 election, he was against James G. Blaine, who was seen as corrupt. Grover the Good, of course, he's honest. We can trust him. And then there came a story that he had a child out of wedlock. He was... Cleveland, when he became president, he was only the second bachelor president. He wasn't married at that point.
Wait. Grover was he was a bachelor partying president?
Of course,
he was
how he got himself onto a boat.
I love this guy.
That's why he got surgery on a boat. It never would have happened.
Exactly. But when this came out, of course, his advisors were like, okay, well, we've got to deny it. We've got to cover it up. And it was true. Like, he had this child that he was supporting on the side. He never really talked about it, but he had supported the child. But Grover said to his advisors, he gave him one charge: tell the truth. And so they went out, he confessed it, and that got him into office. And so he had this reputation for honesty. This was a time that, we can't even begin to fathom, because reporters they did travel along with the president. They maintained a certain distance, but they were at least nearby. And they were asking his folks, hey, where's the president? What's going on? Oh, well, he just had, that little minor surgery. It was just a dental issue. He's fine. And they said, okay, thanks. We'll talk to you later. They didn't question it even when it was suspicious, because they were saying, oh, well, everything's fine. They just believed him. But then it ends up this reporter, Edwards, and I want to say it was the dentist that ended up
I think you're right. I
spreading
think
the
that's what it was.
information. Yeah, he started, folks started asking questions. Hey, where were you the other day? What was going on? He was actually late to an appointment, like when they dropped him off from the yacht. And he ended up starting to tell folks about this. It got to the reporter, and he was like, hey, this is a big story. The president could have died. This is a big deal. But because they had so many other newspapers that were aligned with the administration that said, oh no, this guy's a crackpot. This is a lie. Everything's fine. But then also Cleveland's reputation was the honest man. They didn't believe the reporter until years later. And I think it was Dr. Keene who came out and said, after Grover had passed away, hey, this really did happen. And
Yeah.
I think he ended up writing an entire article that was published in a medical journal about it.
I do think that's what I read. And that's, I feel bad for the reporter the whole time. He gets buried professionally because of this. Yeah. I mean, that's a heck of a reputation. The other thing I looked up, I was curious about this. So you mentioned, Aaron, he lived another 15 years. So I did a quick look. This is not an exhaustive research on my part here, but I looked up, I wanted to know what the cure rates for just surgical treatment of this typical kind of cancer would be. And so found small study, but it just at least kind of gave a general idea. And so if you look at it overall, everybody in this study, and this was between, I want to say 1996 and 2006, everybody, all comers with this type of cancer had a 5-year survival post-op. 54% had a 5-year survival post-operatively, up to 84% if it was a stage 1 diagnosis. And really what that means is that the cancer is very small. The tumor is I think in these stagings, and this is not off the top of I looked this up, but it's less than 2 centimeters. The tumor hasn't gone into other tissues or areas, etc. But I don't know what his staging was. I don't know that he did that back then. I don't know if they
they
did these sort of things. Yeah. But they took out, it sounds like it involved itself into the skull, into areas around the sinus. And so it might have been a stage 4. And that's pretty amazing that they were able to, to remove it. I didn't look this up, but did he die from a recurrence of it, or was it something else?
Oh gosh.
I believe it was something else.
Yeah.
When I was reading about this, they did talk about, there were some changes in him after that.
Sure.
He wasn't as vibrant as he had been. He wasn't as energetic, but he still lived a good time afterwards. But I don't believe it was related to the cancer why he passed away.
That's incredible. That's for the time, especially. That's incredible. Yeah. There's no chemo. There's none of that. And so whatever did happen to that tumor, though, Aaron?
Oh, that's a fun one. It's one of our longtime favorites of the show, the tumor, or actually the tumor and the palate, perhaps? No, a model of the palate. Anyway, you can go see it at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. So one more reason to take a field trip. Yes, although you haven't heard. Yeah, so they're the Mutter Museum.
Go...
Yeah, the Mutter Museum. You should check out the website. It's like a medical oddities museum. Oh my gosh, it's great. Yeah, there's
I know
tons
where I'm
of
going
samples.
on vacation.
Gonna go see
the presidential tumor.
I like to be weirded out.
There's all kinds of stuff like that in the museum, and there's some of that stuff kind of at different museums around the area. But yeah, I appreciate that. You got to save some of those things. It's important. It was a secret surgery, but I wonder how they got the specimen. Did the dentist take it with them and just kind of hang on to it? It was in his estate sale, and then
Well, there wasn't a pathologist on the boat, so
no.
That's why they didn't know exactly what it was or what stage it was or
although I'm trying to picture before folks actually knew what had happened, just this tumor sitting on somebody's shelf and folks come in, hey, what's that? That's not a presidential tumor. It's not a presidential tumor, I promise.
It's weird that you said that every time something comes in your office. I think that about does it, Aaron. Excellent recounting, and glad that everything turned out for the best. Sounds like.
Oh, I think I just found a real historian to do my work for me, as is fitting. Any ER doc, you just find the right people.
There we go. You
Thanks,
delegate.
thanks you very much, Jerry.
Well, that about does it. So, Elba, since you were awarded the title of the most honest medical history intern this show has ever had, what, in your opinion, was the most interesting thing from today's tale?
Well, I may not be able to party with Grover Cleveland. I can go see his tumor in Philadelphia.
There we go. I think that's a perfect
pretty
take home.
dope.
So thanks once again to Jerry Landry, our guest today from the Presidencies of the United States podcast. If you could, can you remind our listeners kind of where to find that, where to check you out, and how to get more of your extensive body of work?
Absolutely. So the website is presidenciespodcast.com. I've got all of my information on social media. I'm on Facebook, the formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Threads, the 5 million other social media platforms that have come up every time that folks think that Twitter's about to die. And then it keeps on going.
I think a new one just came up while we were recording this.
Probably. And I'll probably be on there tomorrow. But I'm always glad to have folks reach out and to be able to talk presidential history with folks. This is nice because I've been in the early republic for so long, but the Gilded Age is just such a fascinating time. There are just characters like Grover Cleveland out there. So thank you so much for having me on to give me an opportunity to venture into the Gilded Age.
Hey, our pleasure. And we will definitely link all of those social media accounts' website and give our fans all the information, both as show notes and on our website. So go and check it out there. With that, we appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you'd like to check out our merchandise or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.forhistorianspod.com. There you can send us messages and find links to our social media sites. We do work to respond to all posts on those accounts, by the way. If you want to participate in the show, use our site to send us a medical history trivia question, which we will pose to Mike. Since he wasn't here, we didn't do it today, and we didn't want to put Alba on the spot that abruptly. You're welcome, Alba.
Thanks.
Eyes are very wide right now. If you're looking for a way to contribute to the show and be a special part of the House of Medical History, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/forhistorianspodcast. And there's also a free way to support us. Go tell a friend about us. Go and leave us a nice 5-star review on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever platform you choose. And lastly, if you're a gamer or just want to hang out with someone else like me when I play video games, check me out on Twitch via the link in the show notes below. I feel like I'm short on projects. Do you think we can add a few more projects?
Yeah, you need some stuff to do with your free time, Max.
I definitely agree. But thanks to everybody who has shown up over there. So with that, the four historians will be signing out. AMA. The following conversation has to do with the upcoming episode, as suggested by the patrons, having to do with our review of a TV show. It has to do with medicine. It's a little teaser for you. It'll be the bonus episode for this month. Hope you're excited. Yeah, so did you guys watch the show that we're doing? We'll keep that secret, but did you watch the show that we're doing?
I watched it right before we got on this call, and it was painful. It was very painful. And not because I don't know any of the medical stuff. Like, nothing medical was a flag for me at all. I was just like, okay, yeah, that seems reasonable, I guess. But it was just cringy, like the drama of it.
Thank you.
Like, as an actor, I'm like, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you. I thought I was crazy. I was watching it and I like it. I'm laughing for all the wrong reasons, but part of the reasons I'm laughing is because a lot of the medicine is atrociously bad. But on top of it, the acting and writing to me is really bad. And I kept thinking as I'm watching it, this is a parody. Why are we parodying a parody? And then I would realize, no, it's serious. Like
it's real.
Yeah, it's
so cheesy. I had cheese coming out of my ears.
That is bad. Gross. You should get that looked at by a doctor. But Aaron, did you take a look at the show?
I've only seen clips, but oh my God, I that's partially because I had a hard time watching any more than a clip at a time.
Oh,
I know. I will put myself through it for our listeners. I promise. I talked to Mike today at work, and he's like, yeah, It's really bad. It's so bad.
It is. It's
Yeah. And
um
then he started taking apart the star too. He's like, oh, yeah. Anyway,
oh my gosh. If you told me that it was made ironically, I would believe you. But I looked and it's not. It's really real. And I can't even figure out like what kind of they're like everything doctors. Like there's some that are surgeons, but then everybody else just can do all the medicine. I can't tell whose role is what.
well, yeah, they got 6 seasons.
They're doing a 7th. They're doing another one. Apparently they got it re-upped, so they're going to do another one.
No.
I hope the acting and the writing, I hope everything gets better after the pilot episode, because that was rough.
It was bad.
So.
That was rough.
There we go. I hope everybody's excited. We're gonna see what we can do with it.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
excited. Aaron, show me your excited face. He's excited.
He's excited.
Excellent. Aaron didn't have a glass of ice in hand. I'm proud.
I try to keep my slurping to a minimum. I save it for the main segment so you can have fun trying to chase down all my drinks.
Excellent.
How am I
There
doing?
you go. I guess it's good.
I work with hostile co-hosts. These people are hostile to me.
Let's see. Yeah. So, all right. So we got. Sorry, I got turned around in my notes. Just a second here. So we talked about Grant, second president.
Aaron, there are no rooms for error. We had a listener post that they missed our outtakes, and I said we've had perfect takes for the last 6 months.
Well, here we go. I just came along and ruined it. Yeah, you could just leave that in. It wasn't that long.
No, you're fine.